All right. So I am supposed to be giving a larger explanation of my code for the project for my CRUD application. Just to kind of go over the technologies that I use, just so that just so you're aware of what I did. Um, I created a front end application using Tailwind, React, TypeScript, and React router DOM for navigation. I used React Query for state management and API requests, and I used React Hook Form for form management. It's kind of like Formic. It's just a little bit easier to use, in my opinion. I also used Axios to be able to make those API requests, just because um, I like it better than the native Fetch API. And I used Headless UI for a couple of design components. I know the project it required Bootstrap, but I got permission from you not to use it and instead use Tailwind. So that's what I did. To just kind of show what the project looks like. Um, it's actually a challenge that I found on Front End Mentor for CRUD applications. What it does is it allows users to create, read, update, and delete documentation files directly in their browser, along with a preview of that documentation file right up for the user to use. I decided to make this a little bit more difficult by adding user authentication to it and creating my own Node.js API to be able for the users to log in. Finally, I deployed it to a live website along with my Node.js application. If you go to travreads.com, you'll actually see this application live. It is still a little bit wonky on the routing, and that's why I have to take a look at probably my router to find out what's going on. I think it has something to do with how I lazy loaded my application in my router. It is. It was an interesting project. It was a little bit on the difficult side, but let's get down to the functionality of it for the purposes of the CRUD application and the login form. Week 13 was, we'll just go over week 13 first, just because it's simpler. It's a little bit faster. For my form, as you can see, if you not navigate over to log in, for week 13, we were supposed to essentially create a navigation bar that users can use to, navigate, I guess it wasn't supposed to be functional, but it was supposed to be responsive. And as you can see, it is fully responsive mobilely, all the way up to tablet and then up to desktop, and users can flip between the different pages. Um, and yeah, so users can use their email and password to log in. I've actually gone ahead and I've created a user account for this application just so that I can demonstrate the second purposes, which is the CRUD application. The user login form, the way that it works is it it has an H2. It says sign into your account, and then it has an auth form. If we go into the auth form, it uses React hook form in order to be able to hook up to the different form inputs to essentially like it registers each input within the form with a name and a required field if it gets passed, and then it maintains the form state for me instead of having to do input.target.value for each and every individual one. I decided to just hook it up to a form state management library and let it take care of it. That lets me pass it through a couple of validators. A validator. In this case, I used Zod along with its own schema to be able to track any errors for the user. So if we go back into the app, I'll just log out really quickly and show you what I mean. If I put in just T, an error will pop up. Well, hold on. Travis, and then if we put in 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, right? And we click sign in, you'll get like an error that pops up that, if you don't have a correct number of passwords, I think it might actually been sign up that did that. Anyways, it basically tracks to see if user input is even valid in the first place. And if not, it just sends back a little bit of input to the user to show them that it's wrong. I also created a sign up form using essentially that component, passing it a couple of different inputs. I basically mapped over the inputs that are handed to the form to create the form input elements, and then at the very bottom have a path name, or have a button with a different path name operator here. Essentially, if it's a sign in form, then it displays one button. If it's a sign up form, then it displays another one. Sign up and then sign in. The auth form itself, when it gets implemented, if we go into my routes, we'll go to login.route. Auth form takes in a schema as one of its props, a submit handler as one of its props, and an input. The submit handler is, in this case, just a, I don't need this console.log anymore. The submit handler in this case is a React query mutation. React query takes in a key for your query, as well as an asynchronous function that returns a promise. And then finally some configuration things. So in this case, I passed it an on success handler and basically run a function whenever this mutation is run and it's successful. And then also if it ever receives an error, I log out the error. The reason why I actually have to do this is it's a TypeScript thing. If you error is not typed automatically here. It's, as you can see, it's typed as unknown, and so you have to test to see if it's an instance of an error class before you can access properties on that class like message. And the reason why you have to do that is because the TypeScript compiler will get very angry at you if you don't. But yeah, anyways, essentially what happens is the user clicks on the login button. It runs this mutation. The mutation runs an Axios request, which is an API, which is a post request that goes to my user/login path inside of my node router. It passes in username is equal to email and password. If we go over to my API, we can see that here in the user router, what happens is the user gets sent to this login path via the router. It'll basically run through this script. It'll get to this point. It'll go, oh, it's at API/users. And then it'll use this router and it'll go in and go, they want to go to /login. And then that runs this function, which first checks to see. It authenticates them locally. Passport is a session management and authentication library. It's terribly documented, which is why it was the hardest part. But what it allows you to do is it lets you basically add users to requests and create session IDs and manage sessions for that user in different ways. You can pass different strategies. In this case, I just used a local strategy and hooked it up to my Mongo database to be able to maintain the sessions if I wanted to. And then what it allows you to do is it allows you to call methods like request.login if the user is authenticated. and like if it is authenticated if the callback function to passport.authenticate actually returns a user. So you can then call request.login and then send a status of, success. What that does is it actually uses the Passport middleware to set a cookie on the session for other auth methods. If we go in here, I do believe it's go back. Oops. If we go in here, it should actually have my cookie, unless I stored it as a application storage. Should have the cookie somewheres. It might be an HTTP only cookie, in which case I think I might have stored it as an HTTP only cookie for like security purposes. That way JavaScript can get a hold of it. But when I was testing it, I didn't have it as an HTTP only cookie, so that way I can see that it was being set. It sets a cookie that is only accessible via HTTP requests from the user and then to the router or to the web server. And then you can use that cookie to essentially authenticate the user at paths that are locked or protected. So if you wanted to lock something like create a document or delete a document or update a document behind a specific user's authentication, that's what Passport is capable of allowing you to do. Anyways, enough talk about that. Going on into the actual application. This is Markdown. It takes you to the welcome page when you first land in here, and it shows you some of the features that it's capable of doing. It allows users to essentially render Markdown files directly into their browser. I've gone ahead and created a Markdown file of my own to kind of show how it's demonstrated. It shows you a preview. You can go up to the upper right hand corner and click this, and it'll actually load in an in-browser code editor for you. That is done via a library called Monaco. Users can come in here and they can edit this. So if I wanted to create a list, I could do so. Is my list. Users can then save the changes to their documents. That way, if they ever came back to this page, say I go to welcome, then I come back, it is actually preserved. Users can also update the name of their documents. So if I wanted to save this, it would save it. If I went back to the welcome page and came back, you can see that it's been updated in my browser bar, and the document name's been updated there as well. I'd pull up my database and show you that it's being updated there, but you just have to trust me on that one because I don't want to log in while I'm recording a video that's going to be posted publicly. That is done via, and I'll stop talking about the backend API. If you have further questions about that, I'll be happy to talk about it. But what that is done is through actually, if we go into the router really quickly, I created a context wrapper for the document context, as well as, and then wrapped the whole user dashboard in this context provider. And what this context provider does is it first gets the ID based off of the parameters that are passed. So if we go back here and we look, this ID right here is pulled off of the router's params. It then on load gets the document based off of that ID, right? And then it sets the markdown that is displayed in the page, as well as the name of the document to that. It then provides those two via context to all of the lower level components that are beneath it via name and markdown. And then it provides a couple of different handler functions to be able to, one, maintain all of the state inside of this context, but also, be able to make it to where it'll update globally across the board. If you update it anywhere, everything references this, so it does that. One notable thing to know about React Query is that you can get a hold of the query client using use query client, which is a hook that React Query provides, and invalidate any of the queries that are within. So what I do is I check to see if ID ever changes, and if it does, I invalidate the query for document, rerun it with a new ID, and then populate the data based upon the response from that new query, right? And I do that using a use effect hook. I try to keep my API requests out of use effect just because it's not a very consistent behavior. So I basically only use the use effect hook to invalidate any of the queries from React Query. The update, excuse me, the update request is actually done via React Query as well. It's actually a React Query mutation. It takes in the current Markdown as well as the current document name, and it sends it to a function called update document, which connects to my API via Axios, and it sends it the ID of the document as well as in the query, and then any of the data that gets put in. The data that gets put in is obviously the name and the markdown of the application. My API then grabs that information, takes it, updates or finds the Mongo entry or collection based upon the ID, and then updates the name and the markdown based on what it gets passed in the request body, actually. Delete document works in a very similar fashion. It takes in an ID, it sends off to the API, it says, hey, here's the ID of the document. I'm authenticated. Delete this document. It does so and returns a status of success. Create document actually just makes a very simple post request to my API to, hey, this is the user. Create a document for this user and return to me an ID. When it gets returned the ID, it navigates to that page on the router, and it uses the same structure that I described before to pull that ID off and then get the information of that document directly into it, actually. And you can see the create function inside of my side component. Here it is, create a document. It runs that function, it creates the document, invalidates any of the queries that are currently present for both document and documents, and then it closes the navigation bar and it navigates to that ID once that ID gets passed via or passed back in the response. The delete function, if we could just take a look at it to see what all of these look like. So if I wanted to create a document, it creates that document. I don't know why it didn't navigate to that page. Let's go here and then go here. That's odd. I'll have to figure out why it didn't navigate to that page properly. But it creates the document. You can edit it. We'll go to test 3, and then this is my header. Documentation is kind of weird. And then main, this my main, we'll have to enter in the correct syntax for this bad boy to work. This is a list. You can then choose to save it. It saves it, and then it lets you flip between the different ones. This is a list. This is my list. If I wanted to delete it, I could click on this. You get a user gets a pop-up window that says, are you sure you want to delete this document and its contents? This action cannot be reversed. You can click off of it to get rid of it if you want. That's done through a headless UI pop-up window. Or you can click confirm delete. It does so. It navigates you back to the home page, invalidates all those queries, refetches the documents, and it's no longer present. So yeah. Oops. Yeah, so a couple of different problems, but we're working on those. The functionality of the app still works, so if we go into, let's go to Google Chrome really quickly. I'll give you a quick brief look into the Mongo database, and then we'll be done there. I don't need that. Last thing that we'll do is actually look into the Mongo database, and I'll show you that the documents are being created and where they're held and how they're stored. Taking a look at it, we'll browse the collections. These are the user documents that are tied to the different users. Each one has a user ID that it's affiliated with. And then these are the sessions as they're being stored as cookies. And then these are the different users that are tied to my database. I've created a couple of different test users here. I'm going to delete Josh because he was just fiddling with my app earlier and I don't want him having a thing. But yeah, if we go to https://www.travreads.com, should load up the browser. We'll go in, we'll click to sign in. We will create a new document. That creates the document for us. And then if I go over here, I take this ID, I go into my database, I refresh. There should be a fresh document having been made. Let's just do ID, should be something like that. If we apply a filter, be this. That's strange. It should have been created. Maybe I'm querying wrong. We'll refresh this. See if we can find it. It is 63553B. There we go. 635. Oh, there it is. Yeah, at the very bottom. I don't know why I can't find it by that. Hang on. I'm not kind of curious. Underscore ID, and then it's because it's. I should have searched like this. There we go. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because it's an object ID. It's a Mongo object ID. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah, and then if I wanted to delete it, I could delete it. It goes back to this. I could refresh this. Search by that same thing. ID, and then this is going to be an object ID of this ID, and you'll see that it is gone. So yeah, that's the application. And there's still a couple of bugs that I have to figure out, but that should do it. All right.